Forgiveness is one of those things that really ought to be pretty easy, but for, I guess, pretty good reasons, it just isn't. What makes it all the more perplexing is that we have a great deal of control over forgiveness. We can decide whether we're going to forgive ourselves, for example, whether we're going to forgive others, or whether we're going to seek forgiveness from others who we have offended, one way or the other. When we do that, sometimes, usually, the problem is solved and reconciliation takes place. Not always, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But let's look at some of the barriers to forgiveness and why, considering again that we have a great deal of control over this, why do we hesitate and sometimes for many, many months, maybe even years, fail to take action? Let's start with forgiving ourselves. Maybe we feel that what we've done is so shameful, so horrendous, so painful to another person. Our guilt burden is so intense that we simply cannot feel or muster up what it takes to seek forgiveness. Maybe sometimes we don't feel we have to anyhow because we've denied that we've done anything wrong in the first place, and it's not our problem. And I suppose we can be right about that. But it does require us to very carefully look inward to see if, in fact, we're being honest with ourselves, especially in the presence of a sustained impasse over the issue. Why don't we seek forgiveness? Well, I suppose I've just touched on that for the same reason we don't seek self forgiveness. For those reasons, I think they apply both ways. In addition to that, I suppose in reaching out to someone else, we may be afraid or embarrassed or afraid that they're going to say no, that they won't give us the permission, or excuse me, the forgiveness that we seek. And you know, that could happen. We don't have any right to expect to be forgiven, even if we feel we're being sincere in our efforts to seek it. The control belongs in that instance to the other person. And if we come forth and say, listen, I don't know what you want me to do, I've apologized, I've owned up to what I've done, now the ball is in your court. Well, it is, but they don't have to hit it back. Forgiveness in that instance is in the other person's control. And if we push too hard or insist on it or become angry that we're not getting it, in a sense, we are adding insult to injury in that instance because we're assuming control over that other person's, and we have no right to do that, over their emotions or whatever other thought process they're using to make the decision that they've made. If that should happen, we can gently broach it another time, but probably it should be sometime distant because if we push too hard too soon, that is an abusive behavior. We don't have any right to do that. Sometimes the answer is going to be no. What about offering forgiveness, though, to someone who is seeking it or who hasn't even asked for it, but we know feels some guilt or some responsibility towards us because of an offense that they are associated with or have created themselves? Well, that is very much in our control. And if we're sincere in offering that olive branch, I think we have a very good chance of remedying a difficult situation. Once that forgiveness is offered, very likely we are fundamentally valuable in improving someone's health status immediately. They perhaps at that moment can shed whatever guilt they might be carrying. Put this difficult episode behind all of us and move on to a healthy relationship again, unencumbered by that obstacle that perhaps has been there a long, long time. Forgiveness is cleansing, both to self and to the person to whom we extend it. There are going to be those occasions where we're going to be denied the forgiveness we seek, um, and we simply have to accept that until such time as the person that we're talking to may be ready to revisit the topic. And sometimes that's not going to happen. Then we can still forgive ourselves, but in that instance, then we do have to move on. We should ask ourselves, too, are there any reasons why we cling to either a failure to forgive ourselves or a failure to forgive others? Maybe in our mind, what we've created is so atrocious we simply can't do it, or we can't forgive for the same reason. I can't think of any time in my life or any offense directed at me has risen to that level. But I can imagine that it could reach that point, especially if permanent injury or death is involved. It can be tremendously difficult to forgive under those circumstances. Would I be able to do so? Honestly, I don't know for sure. I hope so, because consistent with my religious belief, I've been forgiven by Jesus. Therefore, the model has been set before me to forgive others. I hope that ideal would resonate with me if I were put to that severe a test. I haven't been. Maybe you have been, and you're wrestling with this. All I can leave you with, if that's the case, or even if it's a lesser issue, is to consider the benefits of forgiveness. If I forgive myself, the guilt can go with it. All the burdens I carry, all the shame, all that can go away as I wipe the slate clean and learn, hopefully, from the incident and strive not to repeat it. If I forgive others, not only do I stand a chance of perhaps resolving, repairing a broken relationship, but also in giving them the gift of shedding the same shame, the same guilt that they might be carrying. That's a tremendous gift to give someone, one of the most generous things we can do. And on that very positive note, I'll conclude. Thanks.